Boom, what's up everyone? Welcome to Simulation. I'm your host, Alan Sakyan. Super excited to be talking about collective intelligence for the public. We're gonna be talking about sociology, gonna be talking about data science and collective learning. Excited to have Dr. Nick Adams joining us on the show. What's up?
Hi, Alan. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Delighted.
Shout out to Melanie Matthew for introducing us. We love you so much.
Thank you, Melanie.
Yes, Prellis Biologics. And for those that don't know, Nick's background, he is a sociologist, he's a data scientist, he's a multi-company founder. He did his PhD at Berkeley in sociology. And we're gonna be diving into a great amount of depth here. I'm super excited. Let's start things off with this big history perspective on civilization.
Sure.
We find ourselves as stewards of Earth after a long period of evolution, and here we are, 7.8 billion of us with exponential technology. What is your current synthesis on the state of humanity?
The state of humanity. Well, I think we're at an interesting inflection point. What I see coming down the pike is that we really need to figure out as a species if we're mostly going to be running ourselves according to kind of this elite robot consensus, or if we're going to figure out how to distribute our governance and our decision making and our cooperation in a way that's orderly and allows us to kind of all come up together.
Whoa. That was so interesting. Okay, so, whoa. Okay, elite robot governance versus kind of raising the baseline for everyone and with more of maybe like a heart-centric mentality. So teach us about what you mean by those two options, because that's
I mean, so there was Davos just a couple weeks ago,
yes.
The World Economic Forum's annual conference, and the discussion was, a lot was about, can billionaires avoid taxes, but it was, I read an article where someone was talking about the mood and the sense that maybe even the elite didn't have answers to the various questions that are plaguing societies at the macro level. So Brexit and Trump and the turn to the right in some other countries in Europe and a populist version of the right might actually be indicators that they don't have their hands on everything in the way that they have for the last several decades. We also have this rising influence of automation and artificial intelligence and robots that's just kind of on the horizon coming down the pike or in the next 10 years or so, where we're concerned about people losing jobs and so forth. But there's also an opportunity there for perhaps the elite to kind of automate a bunch of the economy and people themselves become even less consequential to the economy. They can be discarded economically and in terms of our governments. And that's a big concern. That's a big concern to me as someone who, I guess along the way I've been fully indoctrinated in capital D democracy. Like I do think it's safer and better for humans to distribute our decision making and find ways to include people.
Absolutely,
So
with education, an educated democracy.
Yes.
So crucial.
Yeah, the public needs to know as much as it can about the decisions that affect its individual members.
And they need to have enough time to be able to explore how the democracy is moving itself in the directions, the options. People are working 16 hours and they sleep for 8, and they don't have time to read or learn anything outside of that 16 hours, then they can't be informed.
I think in many ways, democracy is a really great idea that's yet to be tried, or at least certainly yet to be fully tried. And when I see Facebook with 2 billion users, whatever people say about how well they're doing and with particular aspects of their business model or whatever.
YouTube's at 2 billion as well.
What I see is incredible potential to guide and shape the behavior of other humans, for good or for bad, but shouldn't we be trying to steer it towards the good?
1 out of every 4 people,
Yeah. But you compare the capacity for behavioral change that we have in software to what we've had historically. Like, it used to take decades or centuries to change the way people behave on a regular basis through religion, through warfare and conflict and politics. But Facebook has come along in 15 years and fundamentally reshaped the behavior of 2 billion people. So we have an incredible capacity. We have not even quite figured out how to use it yet, and we haven't even really tried yet to use it for democratic purposes.
Yeah, it's nuts to think about how it used to take hundreds of years and books of religion to influence 2 billion people, aiming to disseminate it across the printing press and one-on-one conversations. And now through algorithms and the internet, you can cast in 15 years, 2 billion human primates can now be influenced with these algorithms. That's so crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested in your sociology eye on this and your data science eye on this, because you illustrate us moving into, this is an inflection point, that we have a lot of wealth now concentrated in a small amount of people more than ever before, and that there's got to be some increase in heart-centric thinking and increasing the baseline for the rest, unleashing the creativity that can unfold from them, the maximizing of their own potential that can unfold from them, which is super exciting, thinking about what they can create and make as long as their basic needs are met and they have access to these tools. So how do you best see us making that flourishing happen?
I'm really glad I've heard you say now this phrase heart-centric a couple times, and it's not something that not a term I use a ton, but I very much resonate with it, and I can talk about it from my own experience. As you said, I've founded quite a few different organizations, and part of the reason for that is that most of the time that I'm in an organization, I have the experience, some organization I didn't found. I've had the experience that the impulse towards hierarchy, whether it's flows of information or power or steam or whatever, are very strong, and that it's actually counterproductive to creativity. So I don't know that I've even been totally aware that that's the main problem that's causing me to start these other organizations, but every time I start an organization, we end up collaborating in ways where I think we're all kind of surprised that it works so easily and so well, and the key to it all is to not behave with that spirit of hierarchy and to create open space for people's own creative impulses. So I think it's a little bit of a shame that here we are in the 21st century, over 1 million years into our evolution, and we actually don't have a recipe book for here's how to create, here's how to run good meetings, here's how to create an organization that really promotes creativity and this open thinking. So that's something that we are kind of working on, and we're kind of a little embarrassed that we don't know more about it, but so far so good in terms of the spirit, and if we can make that a set of institutions or practices that can be replicated, we'll feel like we've accomplished quite a bit.
You again, this is like, where is the basic code? How do we not have a basic code for birthing a human into the world and having them learn about their heart-centric thinking, maximizing their potential, the limited time they have, the 100 billion humans that came before them to build civilization. These basic things, where we came from, who we are, where we're going, that we're so lacking, that would actually, that collective intelligence would help us so much. You've pointed at this a couple times now, this kind of like democracy 2.0, this capitalism 2.0, this inclusive global thinking perspective, that the transition to that is coming. And it's up to us to help inspire more people to think that way and to flourish that way. So I want to ask you about that transition. What do you think to get to democracy 2.0, capitalism 2.0, social networking, knowledge graphing 2.0? How do we make that transition? Through projects like yours, of course.
Yeah, no, we're really committed to kind of living in the future. We're building what we want the future to look like, and we kind of live there. Goodly Labs and Thusly Inc. with TagWorks. Those organizations, we're not interested in kind of fighting or resisting current situations or scenarios or organizations of power or resources or anything. If we can build the future that people want to live in and expand from there, then we don't need a bloody revolution or anything. We just need to be able to give people the tools they need to collaborate and work together.
I like that a lot. Yeah, so you make the option available, and then you gravitate people towards that option, towards this tool set. And you've also identified this in your previous statement about creativity being quelled, unfortunately, in many regards by, Ron and I talk about this so much, but that when people are like 2 jobs, 3 jobs, go and work and work and work, there's no time to actually reflect on your life and reflect on what you're learning in other humans and economies and governments and civilization evolving to get here. And when you have the time to reflect creatively, you explain there's a hierarchy. Well, when you're working at Facebook, let's say, and you're being told by the top, this is what you're engineering, this is what you're designing, this is what you're building with your operations teams, that there is little room for you every day to creatively pursue what new ideas you have to actually make these platforms, these companies that we work at better. A more of a hierarchical structure around creativity would actually be interesting to pursue and find. Okay, go ahead.
I mean, I was saying it's kind of shocking we don't know how to do this stuff. We also don't have really great, indisputable research on human motivation, on like what actually motivates people to be creative and to produce. There's kind of an assumption, a theory, that we need to keep them in a state of precarity, where they might get kicked out in the street unless they do work. Work of a certain kind for an organization that's telling them exactly how to do something for the bottom line of that organization. I think we should be thoroughly questioning that, and it's not a surprise if you look at the intellectual history of the social sciences. They all began as handmaidens to the state. And states that were usually autocracies at the time that they were building the first universities and starting to build these disciplines. And their primary interest was in making a population that was more productive, more docile, more easy to manage.
Obedient workers.
Right. So, I don't know that that anyone with a great deal of resources has ever really pursued trying to allow people to be creatively productive in their own ways.
Yeah, and that's where we need to head. Is enabling the flourishing, that baseline moving up, and the creative flourishing of
I think so. I think we should have more faith in our fellow humans.
I agree.
If we give them those capacities, they might fart around a little bit, but for the most part, they're going to do good things with that capacity.
I agree, absolutely. It's like the mind has so much creative potential. Right. Just once the basic needs are met and the tools are given, the capacity is unlimited where those imaginations can go and build.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk your trajectory. So you found yourself super interested in sociology and data science, enough to go get a PhD, enough to to start Public Editor and to start TagWorks and to be exploring these collective learning solutions. So teach us about that trajectory. We got the fire under your butt.
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess this whole kind of collective intelligence ride started for me back when I was working on my dissertation. And I wanted to understand interactions between police and protesters and city governments across every Occupy movement, and there were 184 of them going on in the U.S. During 2011. My advisors were like, "You should just compare 4 cities, and that's a good dissertation." but I really wanted to have data on all of them, all 184, because that gives a lot more comparative leverage to go deep and understand that, you know, how various sequences of interaction might lead to violence or negotiation or anything in between. The more data you have, the more comparative leverage you have to tease out some of those dynamics. And so with, you know, with a lot of naivete, I jumped into the project and collected nearly 10,000 news articles describing everything going on. And then I pretty quickly realized that there weren't really tools available to analyze all of those documents in close detail in the way that I wanted to. But I just kind of puzzled on that for a while, and you know, a lot of time at the drawing board and trying things out with my team of research assistants, and actually kind of came upon the design that's now TagWorks, which is the key to the design is that you take the very complex job of applying like all of these different labels to your tons and tons of documents. It's a very complicated task, but you can break it out into an assembly line of small, simple tasks and then stitch all of that together at the end, so that you might have a 2-page document that's reviewed by 40 different people, and at the end you have labels all over the document picking out all the data that would be important in your analysis, and it's as good as any expert, but you didn't have to train them. You don't have to supervise them. All of that happens in the software itself. So it's basically adding a new capacity to social science, whereas before we could never really dig into these archives at any kind of scale. We can take on an archive of any size and develop a really intricate knowledge graph of what's going on in that document archive.
I love how your projects are birthed out of the necessities in your dissertation, and which a lot of the times, that is the mother of innovation, is necessity. And so this theme is actually frequently reoccurring for people around the world, is that they have this, usually some sort of a corpus of knowledge, but then they don't know how to parse, query that corpus of knowledge and catalog things by tags and search by tags. This is a frequent problem that we have. And it's interesting that I'm happy that you went out and did the 184 instead of just the 4. That was very interesting. And then with being able to parse 10,000 of these pieces of documentation to be able to take and find these keys from it. It's like you go and you accrue such a massive corpus, but then can you easily automate finding the keys from it? And imagine how much more knowledge we could be getting. And so this is very interesting. So keep telling us about it.
Well, we're really excited about the possibility of being able to take knowledge corpora. Let me start this answer again. We're not live, are we?
Yeah.
We're live, okay.
Corpora.
Yeah, corpora, which is just the plural of corpus, and it's one of these, these self-mystifying lingo things out of the academy, but a set of documents, right?
Yeah.
So you can, there are sets of documents that kind of describe all of medicine. There are sets of documents that describe our legal system and how it functions. And people go to school for a while to become to develop sufficient expertise that they can then share that when they want to for a price to other people. And this kind of professionalization of knowledge actually it kind of ensures that there are different classes in relation to that knowledge. There are people who have it and people who don't. And if you don't, then you pay a pretty penny.
It's a hierarchy of the knowledge graph, and then the valves are sometimes closed from the top to not, you want to flow, you want the data to flow. And,
and over time what this has done is it's prevented humans from being more well-rounded, from understanding ourselves and how we can relate to each other. Or even something as simple as nutrition. It's kind of wild to me that we're in the 21st century and we don't know what we should be eating, and there's so much conflicting information about that. You can see this across the different knowledge sectors that are professionalized. And that's something that we expect to be very different in 20 or 30 years because of the work we're doing now.
This process of making collective learning more effective is one of the most important things that we could be doing right now. We were talking earlier about using technology for good and enabling more people to have this access to this collective learning to help them. That doing things in that realm are some of the most important things we can be doing. So I love how you're focused on this. Okay, so how did the inspiration come then for a public editor as well? Because this mass collaboration software for the news is very interesting. Especially because there's a lot of things at play here. There's people's biases to write certain news in the direction of their favor rather than just an objectively neutral state on the news. There is writing it that way because then they can get clicks, because then they can get ad dollars.
Right. So, I mean, we're really excited about Public Editor. This is a collective intelligence system that the public can use to collaborate, to join together and analyze news articles and put labels all over the articles that pick out the words and phrases that might commit some argumentative fallacy or show some psychological bias or be some inferential mistake or something like that. And all of these labels that we're applying are based on actually centuries of scientific method that humans have developed. So we are, as a species, with science in particular, we've figured out the ways that we fool ourselves, and we figured out how to avoid those mistakes. All of that has been kind of captured in a curriculum that's taught by Saul Perlmutter at UC Berkeley. Saul Perlmutter, he won the Nobel Prize for discovering that the universe is expanding at an increasing rate. He knows something about science, and he's a very popular and enthusiastic lecturer who's got hundreds of students taking this course on scientific style critical thinking.
Love it.
So he came to me 3 years ago and said, hey, I see that you've got this TagWorks tool. Could that be used to find examples of misinformation in the news? Because I have this class where we learn all these different thinking mistakes humans make. We'd like to point them out in news articles. That's really the genesis of the Public Editor project. And so we kind of sketched out some designs, and it was kind of a back burner project until 2016 when there became all this concern about fake news spreading. And we kind of moved it to the front burner, and we've been really working at it for the last couple of years, and we now have what could be described as humanity's first collaborative bullshit detector.
Humanity's first collaborative bullshit detector. That's so great.
Yeah.
Oh, what am I gonna do?
Okay, speaking of that really quick, this humanity's collaborative bullshit detector, enjoy this.
Okay.
There's so much BS in the world. We pursue bigger cars, bigger houses, and bigger salaries that we become so materialized we can barely stand honesty, vulnerability, and spirituality. That all changes around death. Caleb Wilde. Yep. So I wanted to bring that forth because the BS in this world, it melts away around death.
Yeah.
When you're dying, you're remembering just the most profound parts of your life. Like, did I pass enough time with my friends and my family? Did I execute on the dreams that I wanted to bring forth into the world?
Yeah.
And so when we see all this BS when we're 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 around the time of the clickbaity advertising economy, attention economics side of things, that to find the objective, neutral stances on these perspectives and getting fed just what is the most objective and neutral state so that you can parse and understand what is actually happening is so critical. And so, we were as you were talking, we were showing some of the public editor sides of things, and this is again to be able to assess this news cycle, which is so people I know are writing, scientists I know are writing what are some of the profound syntheses of their fields into like Medium posts or into articles for certain journals and whatnot. And then people stop looking at it after 2 or 3 days. And it's gone and it's on to the next thing. But these are some of the best syntheses. So they're dying in the clickbaity 24-hour news cycle. So public editor is a good tool here for the collective learning.
And I think I was at a great conference this past weekend, and someone was talking about the degradation of reading, and they were able to look at the way people read, and they can follow their eye tracking on a screen. And they've been able to look at this over time and look at it in different cohorts, different generations, and see that people are reading much less attentively than we used to. And I think it's in some ways a response to the increasing amount of noise in our discourse and in our dialogue. I found myself now, I read, they call it reading in the shape of a Z. Instead of going straight down line by line. And I've found myself actually beginning to do this over the last couple of years because I know that the point of an article is to be clickbait. And I want to read the headline and then get through a little bit to make sure that the article actually is consistent with the headline. But when we're all doing this, it means the capacity of our discourse to affect change and for people to take it seriously is diminished across the board, including these syntheses, these important pieces that are getting lost.
I love how you're talking about finding the keys in our collective learning and having tools like TagWorks which enable us to more effectively find the keys in the collective learning. And that's basically what we do when we jump into something where we want to look in a Z and we're trying to get through it because we're trying to find the best keys of knowledge in the shortest amount of time. That's kind of what we're doing with this information foraging. Okay, so with Public Editor, we can jump onto the platform and we can collaborate with other people on being able to look at different pieces of news.
Right. So there are two different ways to like be involved with Public Editor. The simplest, lowest weight way is to just be a reader, and we'll have a browser extension out soon where you can get an overlay on any article that will show one of these credibility hallmarks with a 0 to 99 credibility score, and then all the labels on the document, all the labels on the news article. So you can go to the New York Times, and if it's gone through our system, it'll just show up that way.
And tell us about the system a little bit. So it's,
and then another way to interact with Public Editor is to actually be a volunteer, be a contributor. And then what happens is you'd be given various different tasks where you're doing some thin assessment of the article or just some small piece of the article. So maybe you're reading through and you're finding passages where there's evidence used to support some claim. And that's it. You're just finding passages where evidence is used.
Interesting.
And then it's someone else's job. They'll be asked a series of questions that look a lot like a reading comprehension quiz. And as they answer the questions, they also highlight the text that justifies their answer.
Cool.
And that's what's labeling the document with these different assessments of like, oh, well, yeah, I guess I see some exaggeration in the tone here. And then there's a follow-up question that's like, well, how severe is it? And if it's very severe, then we're going to take off 2 or 3 points for that. If it's very mild, we might take off 1 or 0 points for it, right?
Interesting. The exaggeration of claims. These are like comprehensive reading tests that people take about the article.
Right.
Interesting. So you're also breeding a new era of critical thinkers.
Critical thinking, media literacy. You can get it passively just by reading the news with Public Editor overlaid. But if you're a contributor in this system, you're going to learn a lot about what constitutes quality information when we don't know things and how to read and write within those parameters.
And if more and more people start going and landing on the pages with the plugin and seeing scores of 40, 30, these low scores, and they start telling their friends, "Hey, look, I've been parsing these different websites for their media literacy scores, as I myself have been critically thinking and seeing how they're actually rating these platforms, and I'm finding the ones that score 80 or 90 to be way more effective for my knowledge and my critical thinking than the ones that are completely biased, that are trying to cause echo chambers, that are trying to cause cognitive bias and ease."
And exactly. There's an issue that people are really concerned about, and we've probably all experienced it ourselves and with the people around us, called the backfire effect, where once there's a false idea in your head, it's very difficult for someone to convince you to change that idea if it fits with the rest of your kind of belief system. So, like false ideas, basically they take root into your belief system and then they kind of hold on. And no one's been able to find particularly great ways to solve that problem once it's taken root. But with Public Editor, as you're reading through the news, if something is really biased, or if it's posing a false dilemma, or if it's a straw man fallacy or something like that, you're going to see that as you're reading it, and so you will always be doubtful of that particular fact, and it won't take root in the first place. So we think we found a way to interrupt one of the thorniest problems with misinformation.
Yep. This is the future of media. This is the future of journalism. This is the future of critical thinking. Yeah, of multidisciplinary knowledge, of multivariate analysis.
Yeah, we hope so. And the future of kind of social epistemology, or knowing. How do we know together and know that we have the same boundaries on what counts as truth?
Yes.
And are using the same sort of criteria to judge truth. That's something that a lot of people are in fear about right now. Based on the data we have, it's certain that we have these ideological tribes. There's no doubt about that. There's a concern that we have epistemological tribes, where we can't even hope to see things the same way. And I have hope. I don't think we're there yet, but it's something we can test with a public editor system, and it's something where we can bring people together across the political spectrum with this sort of system.
We're going to get there. We're going to get there. Ronnie?
Well, the hope that you have there, Doc, would if, they come attack you. And they, the faith that you have, what if they're going to kill you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I have worried about that.
You should. There's a dark villain among us. Everything that we're talking about, there's a dark villain among us that does not want us even discussing these things, making a better human. We need to be cautious.
When I worry about that, or if I'm really afraid of that, I look at the team page at the Goodly Labs website, and there's 70 or 80 people. From across the generations, across the political spectrum, across ethnicity, gender, everything, who are all working on this, and the ideas for this and even the operational plans going forward are in their minds. So
that's a great
if someone
answer.
comes after me, I mean, I hate to imperil anyone on my team, but they would need to come after all of us.
I got your back.
That. We got a lead pipe for Ronnie, just in case. That's a great answer. Is that if you can take the truth and inspire enough people to pursue the truth with a great deal of health and intensity, then you can't go and destroy the truth when it's populated in hundreds and thousands of people around the world that are pursuing it at the same time. It's much more difficult to make a strike on that. So that actually is a big point for when you are at the edge of knowledge, to push for at least someone to help you disseminate that edge to more people, so that way it doesn't get trapped in one mind, and lost in one mind potentially.
Right.
Okay, so that's a lot on Public Editor. Okay, so now let's talk more on TagWorks, which you already started us on earlier. But Yeah, so being able to analyze these large amounts of documentation and information and taking these keys from it, how does one use, let's get a little technical, how does one parse the natural language and then find the keys? Yep.
Okay, yeah, so this challenge of natural language processing, or parsing natural language, as you said, is really just, it's a challenge of how do we understand human language. And if we think about it in our own interactions, whether we're writing emails or talking with someone, there's plenty of opportunity for ambiguity and vagueness and difficulty understanding each other. A lot of our conversations are, what did you say? Oh, what did you mean? Right? And we're like, even in our own native languages. So computers are even much worse than humans generally dealing with natural language. And most of the advancements in natural language processing, which is just a term for computers trying to understand language, most of the advances in that have come from humans labeling documents and then training a computer to do what the humans did. So it's a supervised machine learning process, but like part of speech tagging, named entity resolution, all of this sort of stuff is humans going through by hand, labeling stuff, and then saying, hey, computer, try to do what the humans did. So we're at a place right now where there's tons of buzz about AI, and there's just kind of a supposition that if we feed computers a huge set of documents, it'll know what to do. And that's just, anyone who has that idea needs to give up that idea. It's not really going to work out that way. And the problem with, until we had something like TagWorks, the problem is that all of the tools for going through and labeling documents were really designed for the situation of an expert reading through, and they know all the different labels, the different highlighter pens, right? The different colors of highlighter that they would want to use. And they can just read through and kind of do it by themselves. Or they can train a few people to think about it the way they think about it. And maybe they can train a dozen people if they're pretty good at managing. That sort of approach just doesn't scale to these very large sets of documents. So that's what TagWorks is really built to do. It's designed so that as a researcher, I can have my expertise, I can get it down on paper, hand it to a customer success person at TagWorks, and they take that and they put it into an interface where the interfaces are not designed so that one expert knows it all and tags it all. They're designed and broken down to be very simple tasks that people on the internet can do. So that you can have like 1,000 or potentially even 10,000 people at a time working on your project.
Yeah.
And that's never been possible. So that's the gist of it.
Damn, that sounds so exciting to be able to take these large amounts of documentation and have human help on a large scale of parsing it and providing us with the proper tools to catalog this data, to effectively tag this data, to make it easier to query it afterward and take the knowledge from it.
Right, yeah, when everything is tagged this way, you can, to the extent that your set of documents is describing human behavior, you have this great data set of human behavior. And much of the most kind of interesting and potentially explanatory theory in social science is this kind of, not macroeconomical stuff and not like little like psychological experiments, but this kind of meso-level theory that describes the way we interact in groups. So symbolic interaction, conversational analysis, and like dramaturgical theories that imagine situations as like these kind of little scripted plays that we go through. So like we all know the script for getting a coffee. We all know the basic script for doing a date or giving a talk or whatever. Like, and we're just going through our life with these different scripts. If you can actually compare across those scripts and situations, you can start to see how the many, many features of the social world are impinging on any individual's behavior in a given moment. But you have to have lots of data to be able to get comparative leverage across so many different variables that are affecting human behavior. And
yes.
That lots of data is often found in archives that are describing events. That's just like, that's one big use for TagWorks. You can imagine.
Thank you, Ron. Go ahead.
You can imagine looking at how gender is expressed differently at different times and places, about how ethnic categories are constructed and how they change over time. All of this sort of stuff, there's evidence of it in the archives of the world, and we can now explore that.
Even just saying the words, the archives of the world, is so interesting, because what data have we extracted from those archives of the world and made applicable to collective learning?
Yeah.
It's so important to take those keys and pass down this wisdom. That's what the 100 billion people that lived before us, that built civilization, they want us to be grateful for everything they made. They want us to be grateful and understanding of these wisdoms that they built civilization on top of.
You're absolutely right. The Archivists Dream, I was giving a talk at the Library of Congress about a year ago, and the Archivists Dream is that everyone's using their archive. Like that's the raison d'etre, right? And that's unfortunately not really what's happening. The way that those archives are kind of constructed and the way they're organized even digitally, even in situations where, you know, there's like, oh, we have a public archive of what's going on in Congress. We have a public archive of what's happening in the Supreme Court. That stuff is actually still only viewable kind of one text file at a time. And it's very much like the same procedure you would undergo if you went to the physical archive, and you have to like check out one document at a time. You have to put on these like white gloves and view it behind a pane of glass. It's very similar to the experience online, where if I want to know what my Congress member is saying, I have to like click on this thing. It's like opening a drawer and find the right Congress, and then pull out a folder, and then here's like the different committees. I have to click on something there, and then I have to find the particular piece of paper, and I can't like take notes on it or annotate on it or scribble on it. Yeah. I just have to read through and take notes in a separate document. So there's a project at Goodley Labs called Liberating Archives, where we take those archives, and now what you can do, thanks to Liberating Archives, if you want to understand what your Congress member is up to, you can go to a website and you can say, well, I want to every single utterance, like anytime they open their mouth on the record, I want to be able to search for that. I can search for it by party, by gender, by their name, of course, and either urban or rural. So you can start to see how the politics of the nation plays out based on these variables in a way that was, it would have taken you hundreds of hours to do before.
I love it. All these different ways to tap into this collective learning archive and be able to extract meaningful data from it. That's what the essence of a lot of what you're working on is. And we're very grateful for you building up this collective learning for the public. And we hope to have more people joining Public Editor and TagWorks. Guys, those links are below. Go and join in to the movement of collective learning for the public. This is huge. This is huge. Okay, couple things on the way out that we want to talk about. So there's
I can see a gleam in your eye.
Yeah,
It's about to get fun.
This is about to get fun. Yeah. We are now seeing more and more of a push for this collective learning to be expanded. We want to push the edge of knowledge further in all of the different directions. One can say that 1,000 years ago, the edges of knowledge were more contracted. We didn't have as much of the scientific method to go and pursue these different, okay? Right. So now the question is, our question to you is, how can we most effectively get children from birth out to these different edges of knowledge? What do you think?
Interesting, out to the edge. I think what we're trying to do with these tools is to bring some of the knowledge closer to people.
Yes.
To make it more accessible. So with the Public Editor project, people are getting an opportunity to kind of interact with the data and build their own capacity to discern between what's true and what's not. So we think those sorts of skills are really important to build early on.
Yes.
You can take another Goodley Labs project called the Demo Watch project, and that's the kind of the continuation of the research on Occupy movement. And there we have people curating all these news articles about what's going on with the Occupy movement, but we don't just have people do this stuff like at their computer separate from an understanding of what the whole project is about. We narrate to everyone in our community like how their effort curating this data, annotating this data, is going to allow us to then do these analyses that discover how things go towards violence, so we can actually prevent it.
Yes.
So with all of our work, we want to, with the Goodley Labs, we want to be able to show people how their effort ends up contributing to knowledge that's really important to us. Like knowledge that could be the difference between us like sliding into a police state or having healthy civic strife from time to time in order to work out our real conflicts.
And that gives us a lot of meaning too, is that contributive effort to the collective learning.
Right.
If we are using these platforms rather than just consuming, we can contribute most really effectively with our time.
Yeah, and with TagWorks in general, there are people who they're going to be doing some slice of the discovery of a knowledge graph, but they can also move up the chain. There's actually kind of a career ladder in mind where you start as someone who's working on a project, but then you can be someone who's helping to lead these projects, because anyone with like a pretty clear idea of what they're looking for in a set of documents can lead one of these collective intelligence projects. And we really want to see a world where there's actually like thousands of little cottage businesses where people are leading others in the discovery of these various branches of these knowledge graphs, especially those that have traditionally kind of been kept out of people's hands.
Yes. And is there a way for them to potentially get compensated as well?
Oh, absolutely.
What would be that way?
Well, with TagWorks, a lot of the people who contribute will probably be working through Mechanical Turk or one of these online marketplaces where they can earn money. But then if they develop a skill set around that, they can start what might be a very lucrative small business. You can take an example of someone has an expertise. They have legal expertise related to like e-discovery. So they know how to look through emails from a company and find what's necessary for some legal case. This is like a skill set that not every attorney has. Having that skill set doesn't make you an attorney, but you could build a business around that's actually incredibly lucrative. And you'd be managing a bunch of people through the internet and through the TagWorks interface. As a company, we end up getting some slice of that, but a lot of the money is going to that small business owner. So anywhere there's expertise that can be kind of liberated, there's also there's a small business opportunity for somebody. And it's funny for me to be saying these words because I never grew up like thinking I'd be an entrepreneur or a business person or a champion of that. But to the extent that this is democratizing knowledge, I'm pretty excited about people being able to get in and have their little piece of it.
Likewise, yeah. Okay, and the quick power 3 on the way out. What's a core driving principle of your life?
Sorry, it's really easy for me because I think about it all the time. It's really to leave the world better than it was when I got here.
Love it. Yeah. How about, are we in a simulation?
Are we in a simulation?
You were talking about these scripts earlier, and I loved it when you were talking about the scripts. Because that is what it is. You know the code for going to use the bathroom. You know the code for ordering a coffee. You know the code for how you should behave with another primate so you don't whack them over the head in your social settings. So these scripts are very interesting. Your heart beats 100,000 times a day. It's a script. The Earth orbits every 365.25 days. It's a script.
Right.
So yeah, tell us about simulation.
I mean, this is I'm a little bit of a metaphysicist as a hobby. So I've thought about this before, and I would say that there's no clear evidence that we aren't in a simulation. So I think it's a theory that's consistent with the reality we experience. Whether that simulation is like programmed in a computer kind of context, I'm less, you know, I don't have any strong commitment about that. But you know, you can also imagine that we're all just this fractured imagination of some deity, and like this stuff is really like at its core, it's
deity.
Imagination
He's
stuff.
obviously mentally disturbed, whatever it is. If that's the case of who we are, he's obviously fucked in his head or its head or whatever it is. I just want to say that. Sorry.
Because otherwise there'd be a lot more peace and flourishing if they weren't so messed up.
It does cause you to have to explain. Yeah, you're right. Okay. But yeah, no, cool. I think it's plausible.
Yeah, interesting. We're very in love with all different aspects of how simulations are actually very meaningful for our understandings, because a civilization evolving is you can say in all these different scripts that evolve with a civilization evolving, one can reimagine what tweaking these variables would be as the civilization evolves, and that can give lots of collective wisdom to how we would want to augment the existing civilization.
I think that's an important addition, because the notion of a simulation can lead people, I mean, given that it's like unfalsifiable, it could lead people to think like that they're kind of powerless. But we see a lot of evidence that we are constructing our society as we go.
Yeah.
So you know, part of what's attractive to me about this, like, you know, fractured consciousness of the universe that is agentic, is that we have the capacity to create our reality and recreate it and make it better than it is. Yeah, I especially like the theory of a simulation where our agency is real and consequential.
Yes, correct.
Yes.
Love it.
Me too.
And the last question.
Yeah.
What is the most beautiful thing in the world?
Overcoming.
Tell us more.
I don't know. I mean, there's like 1,000 Hollywood scripts.
Overcoming, to rise like the phoenix from the ashes of your demise, to rise above.
Yeah, Ron's got it. Yeah. I mean, I don't know much more to say. It's just that I think at various points in history, whether we're talking about human history, biological history, or one's own personal trajectory, you get really low and hopeless. And there's something in that, you know, the abyss staring back or whatever, where someone chooses to press on, and against those odds, you know, the strings start and the symphony starts to rise, and then we've actually done something we didn't think we could do, from total despair to just a sense, oh, well, beauty is the word, yeah.
That was the most beautiful way I think I've ever heard anyone describe overcoming. And what's on the other side is the greatest treasures of life, the greatest beauties of life. And we need a stronger social fabric to make it easier for people to have these processes of overcoming towards that beauty and treasure.
Yeah.
What a freaking enlightening show, Nick.
This was a total joy. Thank you.
I was so happy you had a good time.
Yeah.
We had a great time. We learned so much from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your work in collective learning. Everyone, we love you so much. Thank you for tuning in. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below on what we discussed. Let's get the community going, the conversation going. Also, check out the links below to Public Editor, to Goodly Labs, to TagWorks. Go and check out all the links below. Follow Public Editor on Twitter as well. And join the conversation with organizations that propel collective learning, with artists and entrepreneurs that are pushing the edge of knowledge. Join them, support their efforts. Support them, support us. Let's go. Let's keep building, everyone. And thanks to Ron Vargas for producing and directing. Thank you again for tuning in, and go and build the future, everyone. Go and manifest your destiny into the world. We love you so much, and we will see you soon. Peace.